The people that should attend are operators. So it's the operator of a tour, single day or multi-day, someone who runs activities, an attraction, or the Grand Canyon are attractions, or just experience it. So anyone that's an operator that's trying to grow their business.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special event preview episode of Travel Trends. This is your host, Dan Christian, and I'm delighted to welcome back a very good friend of mine and an extraordinary industry colleague, Bruce Rosard, to the show. But before I do, I just want to give everyone some context to this new series that we're introducing in partnership with Arival. Everyone knows I'm a huge fan of Arival and have been for the last decade, having the privilege to speak on stage, and for the last 2 years, I've been able to record podcasts at their event. Many of our listeners have gotten to know a number of the extraordinary personalities that come together for that event. They've gotten to know Bruce and Douglas, of course. And one of the big developments over the last year is that Arival has introduced multi-day. I was there for the very first event in Washington, which was extraordinarily well received. Travis Pittman, who you'll hear from on the series, was there. He's another key partner from Tour Radar with this event coming up in Valencia. And Multi-Day Tour is taking back to the main stage, and we have an incredible roster of speakers that will be joining us in Valencia. People like Andrea D'Amico, the CEO of We Road, the managing director of EMEA, Brian Young from G Adventures. We have, and the list goes on, and I'm going to highlight them over the course of this episode, but I just wanted to give a little bit of context, which is I want to bring Bruce in today to highlight this incredible event and everything that he and the team have planned. And I then I'm going to be interviewing various multi-day tour leaders over the next 6 to 8 weeks leading up to the event. So you're going to get a chance to hear from the people that you'll get a chance to meet if you come and join us at the conference. Don't forget, we do have the €100 discount, which you can find on traveltrendspodcast.com for any of our listeners that want to join us. If you do use the discount, I will be recording. Bruce and the team have set me up with a really beautiful, high-profile recording space, just like I had in Washington. So you'll be able to find me, and we'll be able to record and get you on the event spotlight episode. So Bruce, let's bring you into the conversation now. Thank you, first of all, for being such a great industry friend and colleague. Obviously, you were one of our biggest supporters at Travel Trends, one of our most avid listeners. And so it's always a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Dan. It's great to be on Travel Trends. As you know, I listen to all of your shows. Usually when I'm out on a dog walk, and I just put on my headphones and listen. And it's exciting to be on one it's been it hasn't been that long. I've been on a few and really looking forward to chatting with you now about Valencia.
For sure. And obviously you were a part of our AI Summit last year. You have run the last 2 years, and you're going to be part of that again later this year. You did an excellent panel. So no, you are very much a part of our Travel Trends friends, family, and community. But tell us a little bit for all of our listeners about the plans for Valencia. Obviously, April 27th to 29th. But tell everyone what you guys have planned for this big event. Why Valencia? And what do you guys have in store for all of our listeners?
So just to set the stage for those of your listeners who are not as aware, what is Arival? I know a lot of your listeners are, but a lot of your listeners are also not. We are the event, the conference for the destination experiences industry. That means when you go on vacation, you're not doing it because of you want to get on a plane and stay in a hotel. You're doing it because of what you're going to do. So our primary audience are people who run tours, activities, attractions, generally experiences. And as you said in DC last year, we brought into that multi-day tours. And they're all so interrelated, the single day tours and the multi-day tours, with this thing called DMCs in the middle, right? So we're really starting to integrate that whole thing. It worked really well in DC, is almost like a beta, and we're going to take that to the next level in Valencia. So there's a lot of things we can talk about Valencia. So to just throw it out in general might be a little hard. If you want to dig in on more specifics, let me know. But overall, think about going to an event where every single person at that event, and we'll have about 800 to 900 people, is engaged in the destination experiences industry, whether single day or multi-day, whether operator of those activities or tours, or one of the tech companies, distribution companies that is helping to support that industry. Those are the people at Arival, instead of being at some big trade show where you kind of have to find those people. It's very much a content-driven show. lots and lots of content that we'll talk about, that you're helping us run the multi-day content, obviously, and coming to MC that, which is great. And we have other tracks going also. And at the same time, a lot of not speed dating type of networking, but a lot of biz dev going on. There's a lot of business deals that also happen.
Well, I'm particularly excited because I've not been to an Arival event in Europe. You've had them in Bangkok. You've had them around the world, and we'll talk a little bit more towards the end about what's coming up over the course of the year. But specifically Valencia, you were there last year. Tell us why Valencia, and specifically what's unique about your European conference.
Well, why Valencia? You could also say why Washington, D.C. in our last event, why Vegas when we started. Picking a destination is hard. There are so many variables and so many whys. Valencia, this is year 2. We're not going to go back next year because I think we've almost outgrown the conference center already. So there's so many things about it. But number one, why is it's a secondary city. It's not Barcelona or Madrid. So it's, number one, more affordable. And in our industry, price matters more than some other conferences where price doesn't matter as much. So we really look at trying to find a venue, a location where the operators of these experiences can afford to go and get a hotel room that's affordable and not, off the charts like some of the other cities. So that was part of it. Obviously, big airport, important. Location where there's lots of other experiences within proximity. All these kind of things come into play. And a conference center where we get the whole thing. So we're not part of this huge conference center like, WTM, ITB, ATM, et cetera, et cetera. We have our own conference center that's just for Arival, and that's a big deal for us.
For sure. And Melanie on our team, who does all of our partnerships, she'll be there at the event. She was obviously delighted to be invited as well. Once I had confirmed that I was attending, I invited Melanie to join as well, since she's been such a key for Travel Trends with all the partnerships. And her first reaction was like, there's never not a reason to go to Valencia. Like, Valencia is such an extraordinary city unto itself. Most people that I've been speaking to, as you know, Bruce, to finalize all the speakers are like just delighted to be going to Valencia. So
it's a great city. Yeah. I mean, it is one of those old walled in kind of historic places surrounded by modern city. And once you get into that old city, it's just like classic Europe that you want to go visit with amazing food and drink and all that.
Yeah, I can't wait. I have not been. So like the city's going to be new for me. The event's going to be new for me. All of those things that I love about travel. And you have organized the week by starting with an executive day, which I know was the first time you did that in Washington. It was so well received. And tell us a little bit about the plans for the week. I know the executive summit is on the 27th, and then the event itself is the 27th through 29th. Tell us a little bit about the executive summit, and then just walk us through what the plans are for those few days so people can plan to attend and join us, ideally for the whole thing.
Yeah, thanks for that. And the first executive summit in DC, 100 people by invitation or application only, was a huge success. We had C-suite from so many different companies. We do charge a different fee above and beyond coming to Arival, and it's not cheap. But everyone felt like it was worth their time and money based on what they got, because it was so unique and different. So we are doing it again in Valencia. That's on Monday all day. We hired a facilitator, a guy named Mark Mecki, to help lead us through it. Anyone that was at Arival Berlin in that was probably like 2023 might have seen Mark. It was about 3 months after ChatGPT was launched, and he got on stage and blew everyone's mind about what AI was going to do. And it was when it was all fresh. He's also, he's done a lot of different facilitation and team building and things for countries all around the world. He's going to help us guide our way into bringing these 100 executives to a point of working together on the industry's issues. What I heard from a lot of the participants was it was great to be in a room with other peers, and no one was selling anyone to anything. That's not why we were there. We were there to work together, to talk about the challenges of the industry and how we can grow things together, and where there are common opportunities. So that's Monday. While that's going on, we also are kicking off our 3, what we're calling streams or tracks. One of them is on multi-day. So we have a multi-day track, an AI track, and a culinary experiences track. And all three of those kick off on Monday with longer discussion groups to try to bring those people together for the first time as the conference gets started. So they get to know each other, kind of forming cohorts, if you will. So if you're multi-day, you want to go find the other multi-day companies right away on Monday. There's other things going on Monday, not as much. These smaller sessions, lots of meeting time, and then a great welcome party in an iconic place in Valencia. So that's Monday. You have something to add?
Well, I was just going to say, like with AI multi-day and culinary, because culinary is obviously the new addition. AI is the next evolution from what we did in Washington together. And I just actually wanted to underline that for all of our listeners is that one of the things that's going to be really unique about Valencia is that all of these streams, as you refer to them, as opposed to tracks, which was a very conscious decision, are going to be woven in over the 3 days of the event. So it's not as if you just come for the AI day or just the multi-day. It's all interwoven to the event, which I think is absolutely the right way forward. And I just wanted to make sure all of our listeners understood that. And then specifically, we'll come back to multi-day in a moment, because obviously I'm really excited about that. But tell everyone about AI and culinary specifically, with what expectations our listeners should have for those topics and how they're woven into the agenda.
Yeah, thanks. So in DC, we had a whole day on AI, the first ever, and I don't know if any other company could really do an AI forum for destination experiences. And that was a full day in DC. But the DC event's a longer event. The US event is a longer event than our European event. So we're going more with this stream of AI starting on Monday. And then we'll have about 5 other sessions throughout Tuesday and Wednesday, specifically on AI, as you said, woven in to the overall agenda of the event. So we're going to bring back, for example, the great debate. The debate is, will AI have more impact in distribution, which is a key part of Arival events, distribution, and who will be the winners, OTAs and other third parties, or direct bookings in the LLMs. Like if I do a search right now, show me a tour in Valencia I want a bike tour where I can also get good food. Who's going to win that distribution in ChatGPT or Gemini? Who's going to show up first? Is it going to be a Viator to Get Your Guide, or is it going to be, Dan's bike and food tours? We're having a debate on that. How is search and discovery changing, right? Which we all know it is, and it's changing fast. Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about agentic and, building custom GPTs and how easy that is now, and even vibe coding and what that could be like. And then finally, we do something whenever we do an AI forum, and we've done this at the last 3 or 4 events, we'll have an AI lab. So we'll have about 10 experts, imagine 10 experts at a table, and the attendees rotate every 15 minutes between the experts, who will each have something they're talking about. And it'll be super actionable. People should be bringing their laptops and, so not just sitting, listening to people on stage, but really learning, oh, I can do this, I can do that. So that describes the AI track or stream right now, right? And it's throughout the whole time, hours of content. Culinary, we've been talking about for a long time. We had a great culinary experiences track, if you will, last year in Valencia. It was co-led by a guy named David Mora, who comes from the Basque Culinary Institute down in San Sebastian. And he's brilliant about culinary experiences. We have someone coming from Pernod Ricard, who you introduced me to, who is going to come and talk about how Pernod Ricard looks at culinary experiences, which is very different than a food tour, right? We're going to have a couple of food tour operators. So those are going to be the hosts of the culinary experiences sessions or stream. And then we'll have different topics that they're going to help develop that are focused on how do you build a better culinary experiences business or integrate culinary experiences into your business if you're a bike tour, walking tour, whatever tour company. And then, of course, the final stream is multi-day, which you could talk about as well as I can. And, getting multi-day on our main stage and getting a number of multi-day sessions that we could talk about in more detail if we have enough time.
Well, we're going to make sure we cover it all, and we're going to keep these sessions, including the one today, we're going to keep it fairly succinct, and most of the sessions I'm going to be doing subsequent to this will be 10, 15 minutes, like power sessions, to give you as much context about being at the event. So one of the things I want to ask Bruce is who should attend and why. But just before I do that, I'll just give a quick overview of what you can expect from the multi-day track, because what Bruce just highlighted too with culinary, which is another major opportunity because you have so many operators in the culinary space, all the way from like underground donut tours, right through to, the secret food tours. And then there's so many companies in that space. Pernod Ricard, Laura Cilio-Pavat, who has been a huge fan of our podcast. She's been on multiple times. She's an amazing female global executive. So I was thrilled that she's going to be joining and speaking at the event, because as a European, I mean, she's Italian, she's French, she speaks 6 different languages. And for us, I'll say both of us, Bruce, Americans, Canadians, North Americans, it's, Europe presents so many different opportunities to understand the travel industry. And the reason I'm particularly excited about the multi-day is exactly that reason. This is the birthplace of multi-day tours. This is where some of the biggest innovations are happening today. Obviously, Tour Radar is based in Vienna, but we're also going to have the CMO from Exotica, Wanho, joining us, who I couldn't be more thrilled about. We have companies like Nazaza and TUI, and on the main stage. I'm delighted that I'm going to have 2 of my amazing industry colleagues from the Travel Corporation I worked with many years, Natasha Lawrence from Kentucky, who's been on our podcast, Tom Macklin as well from Evan Evans, who's also been on our podcast. I'm saying that so you can listen to his episode before you come to the event. We're going to have Josh Carr from Urban Adventures / Intrepid, and we're going to have real focus on marketing and technology and distribution. So there's a lot to look forward to on the multi-day side. So given all of that, Bruce, now that our listeners know about Arival, they know about Valencia, they know the content we're going to cover, who should attend? For anyone who's listening to this and trying to decide whether or not they join us, the value for money from my point of view is like, as a longtime attendee, €1,000 or thereabouts for a ticket, depending when you buy your ticket, whether you're an operator or a non-operator. It's very affordable, and the value, we're staying actually at a beautiful hotel. It's the Malia. So it's a gorgeous spot. But tell everyone who else should attend, Bruce, and what, from your point of view, what the main reasons they should plan to be there with us.
Well, I've spent 10 years talking about that. So the people that should attend are starting with, we call them operators. So it's the operator of a tour, single day or multi-day, someone who runs activities, which could be like a bike rental shop for simplicity's sake, an attraction like the Eiffel Tower, or the Empire State Building, or the Grand Canyon, are attractions, or just experiences. Like you said, the great underground donut tour. So anyone that's an operator that's trying to grow their business, it's as simple as that, with a couple caveats. If they're a hobbyist and, they get out on some weekends and run a tour, maybe not so much. But if they're really trying to grow their business, they have, I would say, almost a minimum of $250,000 or euros a year of revenue is where they're getting to that size. And they want to grow, where Arival will absolutely be valuable to help that growth. What they'll find is the sessions that we've been talking about and we put together, if they sit and they listen and learn, great. They will learn a lot and they'll come home with takeaways guaranteed. But even more so, they'll learn from their peers. The peer-to-peer learning that goes on at Arival, because everyone there, first of all, there's not a lot of competition, right? Like if I'm a bike tour operator in Boulder and you're a bike tour operator in Toronto, we're talking about what I do and what you do, not as competitors, but as friends and people that we can collaborate with and just learn from. And that's what goes on at Arival, is all this peer-to-peer learning. And if you want to grow your business, that's why you come to Arival. And grow your business is by learning things you didn't know, by meeting people that could become partners, and understanding how others, just like you, who have the same challenges and opportunities, how they're dealing with it. The other side of it are the tech companies and the distribution companies and the AI tech companies, marketing agencies who are providing services to these businesses. So, of course, they're coming as sponsors. Some of them are our speakers. But anyone that wants to get into servicing the experiences industry, whether it's single day or multi-day, should definitely be at Arival.
Fantastic. No, I appreciate you sharing that context. And obviously this relates to every event that you guys run. And I want to highlight that as well, especially for those of you who are, whenever you're listening to this podcast, Arival.travel is the website you need to be checking out.
1R, yeah.
All the events are listed there. So Valencia, April 27th to 29th. Many people, I'm hearing more and more buzz about the event, even as I was reaching out to speakers, that people wanted to be a part of Arival. They heard about the multi-day. They've heard about AI. They specifically heard about the executive summit as well. So there's all this buzz around Arival in 2026. And with that momentum, you guys are expanding to more destinations. I know we're together in Spokane, but you've added Brisbane. So tell everyone, Bruce, what else is on deck for 2026 for anyone listening to this, for any reason. Well, join us there, but join us at other destinations as well. But if anyone can't join us at the end of April, tell us where else they can join us, especially all of our friends listening in the US that will be able to join us, and our friends in Australia too. That's like our third biggest audience for this podcast. So I'm keen for them to know about Brisbane. I saw Campbell Harris from Global Journeys instantly delight seeing that the event, because he was trying to work his way to come to Valencia, and then he was like, "You guys are in Brisbane." So tell us what else you guys have planned for 2026.
Well, and also why, right? Like it was interesting. I had someone from Australia say, "Wow, you're coming to Brisbane. I was planning to go to Spokane. Should I go to Spokane and go to Brisbane, or just go to Spokane because Brisbane will be small?" Like, there's people that are trying to figure that all out. So here is how I look at it. It really depends on your objectives. So yes, we've been planning on Spokane as our major U.S. event, and that is going to be our major U.S. event in 2026. And that's always our kind of global main event of the year. It'll be our biggest event of the year, although Europe is catching up quick. Brisbane, we really wanted to get back, not just to Australia, because we haven't been there, but to that region. We've been to Bangkok a couple times. So we're looking at that as a way to get back into Oceania overall and APAC, and really focus in on the Australia market. And we've been talking to a lot of the key partners in Australia, and there's a lot of demand on both the single day and multi-day perspective. So we're going to be in Brisbane June 22 to 24. So it's coming fast, and everyone down there is like, "That's only 5 months away." Like, yeah, it is. And my marketing team is like, "Yeah, let's go." But we already are getting great response. We're doing a promo for like the first 100 to register, get a discount, and we'll have a list of key brands. And I put it out on LinkedIn. I think we'll get to our first 100 in 10 days. We'll see, we'll see if we can get there. Now, that event is obviously really going to be differentiated by who's going to be there. It's going to be people from Australia, from New Zealand, from Asia Pac. It'll be some of the same content, but some will be different, because what matters in that part of the world is different than what matters in Europe, which is different than what matters in the US. But what really matters is who will be there. And it depends on your business objectives of whether it makes sense to go to which one. And anyone have any questions about it, they can find me pretty easily at bruce@arival.travel. It's 1R in Arival, and send me an email, and you know how responsive I am, Dan.
I do indeed, definitely, Bruce. And just so everyone knows too, the dates for Spokane, which is October 13th to 16th. So plan to join us in Spokane in the US. I know a lot of Americans that have reached out to me to listen to our show, especially people in the industry. They're very keen to be there. They're very keen to be involved in the multi-day. And so I've actually already been incredibly mindful about who we're going to have as speakers and the companies that are going to be involved in Spokane, because we always want to keep it fresh. We always want to have new perspectives. So we've got an incredible roster for Europe, which is very European focused, which is absolutely the intention, but we'll have a number of American companies and speakers for Spokane specifically. So there's a reason definitely to attend both. Obviously, Bruce mentioned the dates for Brisbane, but just to finish up, for anyone that is just coming to know Arival, you of course have an incredible newsletter that I encourage everyone to register for. I always look forward to getting that every week. It always comes from Douglas. I'm like, hey, I'm getting an email from Douglas, but it always has great, valuable content from Janelle and the team. And that's the one thing I just want to compliment you, Bruce, because the team at Arival, I love working with them. And, Kimberly and I collaborate on some of the multi-day activity, and Carrie on the marketing. And there's a really terrific team over there at Arival. And you guys have the podcast as well, which is the best part of travel podcasts, very much your brand identity. But I want to make sure we mentioned the website. Is there anything else, Bruce, you'd highlight that people should know about Arival?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, we're a research company. First and foremost, we're a research company. Both Douglas and I worked at Focusrite before starting Arival, and we learned from the great Philip Wolf that you start with research and you build events from there. If you don't know what you're talking about, if you don't have the trends and the data and the facts, it's hard to be that thought leader and expert that's trusted around the world like Arival is in our sector. We just published what we call the Global Operator Landscape. It was our 4th edition. It's an annual thing we do that had a survey of over 5,000 operators. This is all the single day experience operators. And that's available on our website at arival.travel. A summary report for free, the real detailed report you have to buy or be a member of. It's not expensive. We're going to be doing a similar output from the survey we did of multi-day. It'll be the first time since COVID that we did it during COVID, but no one else has ever done a report that says, here is what operators in multi-day are doing for technology, for distribution, et cetera. And that's the kind of questions that we asked in our multi-day survey. We're doing consumer work. So there's a lot of research work that I would encourage anyone that really wants to understand the industry, whether it's the single day experiences or the multi-day. We've separated that out. That just go to Arival with oneR.travel and search around for the kind of research that you're looking for. If you're a member, which again, not that expensive, you have access to all of that research for free.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the sessions we have, as you know, we have planned for the multi-day is this research, which this entire category has been underserved with the research that's been done to help everyone understand the market size and the opportunity. So that I know is an important one for people to pay attention to, and a number of companies that have been involved in that research report. So I'm glad you highlighted that. But yeah, Bruce, obviously, I love working with you and the team. I'm so excited about this event. I want everyone to join us. And I know the numbers are already strong for Valencia, so get your tickets now because eventually the event will sell out. There are ultimately only so many spots. So get your ticket. Grab the discount off of our website, traveltrendspodcast.com. And every week leading up to the event, we're going to be releasing new episodes to highlight the multi-day tour track at Arival. Thank you again, Bruce, for joining us. Good luck with everything in 2026, and I'll be seeing you again soon.
Dan, so awesome. Thank you. Take care.
Ground sea transportation is a huge and super important part of the travel industry, and it's currently being overlooked. And it's something that everybody needs. Everybody's going to use it at some point of their travels, and everybody's going to have a hard time booking it unless the industry goes online. So it's a huge opportunity, and it's really kind of the last opportunity to digitize the industry in travel today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special spotlight episode of Travel Trends. This is your host, Dan Christian, and today I'm joined by Noam Toyster, who is the CEO and co-founder of Travelier, a company that has been powering a huge part of the global travel industry that often gets overlooked, and that is the ground and sea transportation. Often, all the attention goes to flights, but as Noam highlights in this episode, there's actually more daily departures by sea than there is by land, and there's a whole lot more complexity given the fact that the size and shape of those ships varies much more significantly than planes. We also look at this whole idea of connected travel in 2026 beyond air and what happens in between, the buses, the ferries, and the trains, and how they really are the backbone of how travelers are moving through regions, connecting with destinations, and ultimately experiencing places much more deeply. That's actually one of the big themes I wanted to pick up in this discussion, which is this concept of secondary destinations. And I think that's one of the biggest trends in travel today and what travelers are looking for. They're looking at dupe destinations, places that are not as over-touristed and places that offer additional value and they're less explored. A perfect example of this is Thailand. I've been to Thailand multiple times, and over the course of many years have traveled through Koh Phangan and Koh Samui and Koh Tao. What I didn't realize, and that Noam points out to me today, is they actually offer a direct from Bangkok with a flight and a ferry to get direct to Koh Tao, which would have been a much more difficult destination to get to. And it's also one of those destinations that more and more people then have access to explore. We talk about the impact this has on local economies and demand for new destinations, which I think is one of the most exciting aspects of what they've been building. The other part, of course, is this is a marketplace. So we talk about business side, and then we break down the B2C and B2B components and how, whether it's backpackers or families looking to take these types of trips, or them working with OTAs, tour operators, to make sure that this product and inventory with all the real-time data is available to them without actually having to build it themselves. So if you're interested in the future of travel, which I think is most of our listeners to our podcast, but specifically how smarter travel infrastructure and connectivity will shape where and how people travel, then this is a conversation you definitely don't want to miss. Noam, welcome to Travel Trends. It's great to have you back with us.
Great to be here, Dan. Great to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Tell everyone where you are today and where your headquarters is.
I'm in Tel Aviv. One of our headquarters is in Tel Aviv, Bangkok, Buenos Aires, and Sao Paulo, and Split in Croatia.
Amazing. Well, it's truly a global company. Obviously, we had the privilege to meet again at the Focusrite conference in San Diego. So people on our podcast have heard your voice before. Everyone got a good sense from that introduction there about the company and your background. But I'd love for our audience to hear it in your words as we feature Travelier and what you have built, which is incredibly impressive with your two co-founders. But I would love to hear from your perspective. Tell everyone a little bit of the backstory on this company and what you guys do, because you have, this is the part that amazed me, you have so many brands underneath the parent company, and you've got such a unique business. And I think one of the things that stood out to me, which is like the last undigitized sector in travel, and the fact that you power like ground and sea transportation. Like when I met you and got to know more about your business, it became more and more fascinating. So tell us how you would describe Travelier and what you guys do.
Great. So Travelier is the ground and sea transportation booking platform. So basically, we're a platform to digitize ground and sea transportation. So buses, ferries, rail, anything that's intercity transportation, private car with driver is traditionally services that people still book in most of the world offline. They people book on ferry piers, bus terminals, agents on the street. Super fragmented industry with tens of thousands of small, medium businesses around the world that run buses and different vehicles around the world. And most of that industry is still booked offline, and we digitize that industry. So we're basically booking.com for ground and sea transportation for buses, ferries, rail on the one hand. On the other side, we provide different services for bus and ferry operators. First of all, we provide demand, but also we provide them with software and other services that they need to run their business and get customers online.
Well, what I find fascinating is that, this is a $200 billion industry or somewhere in that realm as I was doing my research and preparing for our conversation today. And one of the things that any great startup, there's an addressable market. And so clearly you're a serial entrepreneur even before creating this company. But, this is now nearly 10 years in. But any great startup has an interesting origin story about trying to figure out what the problem is they're trying to solve. Tell everyone about that, about your honeymoon, because I found that really interesting when we spoke directly and just knowing a bit about your background. But tell everyone how you realized that there was an issue here and that ultimately how you set out to solve it.
Yeah, so I was traveling. When I was traveling, it was already 10 years ago now. So I was, still young, happy, no kids, brown hair, and and still very free. And I was traveling in the Philippines. I was trying to get to a very famous tourist destination north of Manila, called Banaue, and it's a kind of World Heritage Site, rice terraces, beautiful rice terraces, and together you need to book a bus ticket at the bus terminal because that's the only place you can book it. The bus terminal is quite far away from the center of the city. You get there are only buses for the next day because it's always fully booked, and then you come back the next day. You buy the ticket, you come back the next day, and the buses are filled with tourists and locals that have done the same thing. And that's kind of weird. That was kind of weird for me at that point because this is 2016. Hotels are already booked online completely. flights, obviously, but still buses are not online. And I came back to Israel. Like I said, I had a previous startup that was just shutting down at that point, and I built a very simple website that sold tickets from Manila to different destinations. And I had a Filipino travel agent that used to go to the bus station once a day, buy the bus ticket, the physical bus tickets that I had booked the same day, and take a photo of those and send them to the customers by email. And the customers would come to the bus station, show the ticket on the phone, and since the number matched or the name matched, then they would just board the bus and it was fine. And pretty soon I kind of realized that that thing worked, even though it was like a super simple and non-reliable website. Duplicated it in a couple of other destinations which I knew are popular, and I realized it's a huge industry and it's a huge opportunity with a digital gap. And that's how we founded Travelier initially, which was called back then Bookaway. Um, and we raised the pre-seed round into late 2017. Started a hub in Bangkok. Started to kind of visit different bus companies and transportation operators around Southeast Asia, and then expanded to Latin America. And I think the rest is history.
Well, the part that's really fascinating for me is that Bookaway, obviously, as you mentioned, was the initial brand, and obviously you still have it's evolved since then. Like, I mean, the fact you've created what became like the fastest growing ground transportation marketplace. You know, you've got nearly 2,000 cities. You're in like over 100 countries, and that's how the origin of the business started. But you have a whole series of brands underneath that: 12 Go, Platforma 10. Tell us a little bit about and traveling.com. And obviously, if people, as I mentioned at the beginning, that travelier.com, if you want to follow along our conversation. But tell us about the brands under the portfolio now and how it evolved from Bookaway to Travelier and all the brands underneath the parent company.
Yeah, so we had an interesting story because we were founded as Bookaway, and we had a great growth in the early years, and then COVID hit early 2020, and the entire industry was basically down to zero pretty quickly. And we initially, tried to kind of figure out what we want to do, and we thought that this is going to be a 6 months, 9 months problem, and then it'll go away. But it didn't. And at some point, we looked at the market and what's going on. And we thought we need to do something. And what we ended up doing is that we ended up acquiring 4 of our competitors during COVID because we looked at the market. We had a firm belief that travel is going to come back. We just weren't sure if it's going to take a year, 2 years, or even more. And we also understood that this is a great opportunity for us to some degree. And we ended up acquiring a couple of competitors and rolling them up into Bookaway, changing the name to Travelier because we at that point we became a company that had several brands, so we wanted to put Travelier as kind of the brand that consolidates everything. And we ended up acquiring these companies, merging them into what was at Bookaway, which is now Travelier, and ended up growing enormously post COVID, and we continue to grow at a very fast pace since then.
Well, and one of the things I'm keen to know a bit more about in our chat today is the team, because you and I have gotten to know each other quite well. And obviously it's always great to see you at the industry conferences. So you are, very active. And even as I was preparing for our chat, I was reading some of the latest interviews you've done and understanding the company even more deeply than I do and the trajectory you're on. But tell us a little bit about the team, because you have 2 co-founders. And also I'd love for you to share a bit more about where the team has gotten to today, like given all the offices and the size of the team. But tell us a little bit about the founding team and their roles.
So my both co-founders actually come from Hotel Beds, if you know the company. So they were both VPs at a company that Hotel Beds acquired a few years back, and they were VP product and VP marketing. And when Hotel Beds acquired their company, they decided that they don't want the corporate life, and they thought of building a new startup, and they had this original idea of a travel planning app. and and they thought it's a killer, and they went to one of our investors and they told him the story, and the investor said, "Look, I mean, I've seen a million of that, so I'm not going to invest, but I do have a company that I'm investing, I'm invested at, and I think you guys should meet the founder." And I met them, and you know, we were at an immediate click, and they joined me as a founding team early on, and then you know the rest is history. And one of my co-founder originally was the product. Now he manages all the different brands. Kind of manages the COO at the COO level. The other co-founder led the Bookaway brand. Now he's leading the supply operations around the world. Yeah, that's the founding team today, and we're now 620 people, I think, in 5 different hubs around the world. We had enormous growth during 2021. Obviously, when we did the M&As, we grew, I think, from about 50 people to 250 people in a very short time. And since then, we continued to kind of scale with the business growth.
It's fascinating, and that's why I wanted to highlight that, is because one of my favorite TED Talks is Bill Gross's The Single Biggest Reason Why Startups Succeed. And the factors that many of our listeners may be familiar with, obviously timing is one factor, the team, the funding, and then the execution. And the reality is that the single biggest reason is timing. And so but you have to have all the other factors in place as well. You have to have a strong founding team. You have to have investors that back you. And you guys have had all of those elements, which is why here you are, you know, nearly 10 years in, and you're a global success story that many people, including a lot of our listeners, have never heard of yet.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I would add that one of the main factors that have like huge correlation with success is speed of execution and speed of decision making, which I think is something we're pretty good at. We've also were fortunate enough, and I didn't mention it before, the fact that we were able to execute 4 different acquisitions during COVID is because we had investors that were bullish and were like really strong and supportive investors that looked at the business and said, you know what, you know, we're doubling down because we believe there's an opportunity.
Well, and let's talk about that market then, because this is also the part that I find really interesting, is that you set out to solve a problem based on your perspective, your experience on your honeymoon. And obviously, as you said, you were young, little kids, you had lots of energy, you still do, but nevertheless, that is a time in your life when that's a perfect time for a startup, for anybody listening to this, having had twins and then going through that journey. And so one of the things, though, that I wanted to dive into is the market itself, because flights get so much attention. Everyone always talks about flights, and obviously there's startups like Hopper and Skyscanner and but interestingly, like buses, ferries, trains do not get as much of the spotlight. But you highlighted as well that clearly there was competition. You acquired 4 of your competitors during COVID, like an incredibly savvy time to be active, knowing travel is going to come back. A lot of our listeners are investors. We've got a lot of private equity and VCs that listen to our podcast because they're trying to figure out where travel's going and where they should look to acquire businesses. And I always find that fascinating when they reach out to me with questions, because they hear fascinating insights from executives and founders like yourself, where they all of a sudden understand there's a new market opportunity. But for you, not only do you have to realize there is an opportunity, you have to execute against it, which is exactly what I'm trying to get to here with this question, which is like, how do you seize that opportunity? And then that whole concept of like, what got you there won't keep you there. You need to continue to innovate. But tell us a bit more about how you stitch all this together. So when you realized there was the opportunity for ground transport and specifically sea transport as well, which I would say is probably even the more unique part of your offering, how does that work from a technology point of view, working with partners? How did you solve for that and then integrate it into the traveler journey?
So first of all, there's one point which you mentioned, which is super significant, and I don't think a lot of people realize it, and that there are in magnitude more departures of flights, of buses, ferries, trains, and so on than there are departures of flights globally, right? So if you think about like number of people that actually travel, then ground sea transportation is significantly bigger than flights around the world, but still it's not digitized. Now, if you go in and again, we work in Asia and Latin America. The experience would vary a little bit if you go to Western Europe. North America is much more digitized, obviously, but those are different markets. But if you go to most of the markets in the world, if you try to book ground and sea transportation, there's two things you will notice. One is you don't know anything, so you don't know when the bus or the ferry or whatever it is actually leave. That like it's not in list. You're gonna have to go to different websites, blogs, and kind of figure it out. You don't know how much it costs. If you do find a price, it's probably from 5 years ago. Um, and you definitely don't know what's the experience like in most places because a bus in Argentina is a great luxury experience and you can sleep in it, and a bus in Bolivia, right across the border, could be completely different. And that one is completely different than a bus in Thailand. And two companies within Brazil would have different experience, even though both of them would call it an executive bus, right? Because there is no standard in the market. It's not like a 737 is a 737. And the content is not out there. So not unlike hotels where you see the images and you see the reviews and what everybody said about the hotel, that rarely exists in ground and sea transportation. So you're going to have a hard time booking that. The reason behind that is fairly kind of structural. And we can go into why that's the situation. But if you look at the travel industry, there's very few kind of inventory management systems. So if you think about the hotel world, then property management systems work. If you think about flights, you have seating management and so on. Then you have aggregators, big companies, Amadeus, Hotelbeds, and so on. They actually aggregate all the hundreds of thousands of operators or businesses, and serve them in single API. In ground sea transportation, that infrastructure has not evolved. There's several inventory management systems, usually not really scalable technology. Aggregation, there's basically nothing besides us and some competitors that we're not going to talk about, and or maybe we can talk about them. Yeah, and that's it, right? So I hope that answered the question.
No, very much so, and I'm glad you actually went into detail on that because I'm genuinely interested. Which obviously part of the reason I asked the question, but I'm sure our listeners are too, because minds are being open to one of the things you just shared right there, which is the number of departures for sea transportation is greater than air. And what you also described was a very complex problem to solve that we did an aviation series at the end of season 6. And we talked about the fact that, many of the low cost carriers, they have the same jet units in the 737, like this, or the MAX, or there's most of the low cost carriers have the same plane because they can sub them in. And so there's consistency in the delivery and the experience for guests, but you have so much more complexity to the market that you operate in. The other part that I also found really interesting is the whole marketplace, the B2B and B2C side. So I'm very keen for our listeners to also understand how you tie those two together, because you, as you just highlighted, you're working in all these other global markets, and then you're trying to take the offering for buses and ferries and trains, and then try and figure out how you take that supplier side inventory and make it accessible for travelers to book. So given that you guys operate on both sides, B2B and B2C, can you give us kind of a bit of an overview of how those two sides differ and how you make sure they complement each other?
Right. So I think that most of the marketplaces have a similar flywheel or dynamics, which goes through getting the supply, then kind of optimizing the offering, getting the customers, having a really great customer experience, and then having the customers come back, which in turn kind of creates a value for the supply side again, right? In our marketplace, what we realized and we felt that the big kind of the starting point, or the big pain point, is actually the supply side, because the supply side wasn't online, right? So if you started a new marketplace today, like Hopper, which is a great company, right? But flights, they had kind of the access point to the flight inventory. They just had a different experience around it. When you start ground and sea transportation company, you actually need to figure out how you sell the inventory, how you bring the inventory online. And our initial I guess, strategy and the way we operated in the first years was that, if you build it, they will come. Like we bring it online, and people look for it, and it sells, and it kind of worked, and it still works to some degree. Although now we focus on more on both sides of, like, we focus more on the customer experience as well, and on the supplier experience. Now, because we see ourselves as a kind of system of record for the operators, we kind of an infrastructure for them. So we start by actually bringing them online in various ways, and we can talk about it because they don't always have the technical infrastructure to actually connect with us. So we bring them online. We provide them with the technical infrastructure to go online if they need it, if they want it. We provide them with other services like help with financing sometimes, and something like that. Sometimes we would, for example, look at a certain region, and we'd see that we have demand for a certain route. So people are going from A to B, and then they go from B to C. But a lot of people are looking, how can I get directly from A to C? But that doesn't exist. So we would go to a ground and sea operator and tell them, can you open a bus route for us? Because we have demands for that. And sometimes we actually go out and fund the bus, the actual bus, to say, hey, we're going to buy the seats in advance if you can sell us if you can open the service. So we provide them with demand, we provide them with software, and we provide them with other kind of financial capabilities. And that in turn creates a situation where we provide real value for the supply side while actually enabling the seamless booking experience for the customer.
Well, and that's where I'm keen to go a little deeper on the B2B side in particular, because partly given my background with trying to connect supply with the demand, but like the challenge that still exists in the travel industry with so many experiences not being digitized. I mean, even my role at Lonely Planet over 15 years ago was the idea of trying to make Lonely Planet reviewed and recommended accommodation bookable online, which is largely what booking.com did. And that's a massive industry in itself. And I see that you guys are, I would say, still in relative infancy in terms of the potential, given how much of this product is offline. So I wanted to talk about the supplier side, because I'm sure there might be suppliers listening to this, Noam, that might go, wait a second, we're not working with these guys. I'm like, how do we get on this platform? How do we sell through them? So when you, on the B2B side, how do suppliers, or even for that matter, distribution channels, work with you guys?
Right. So first of all, yeah, you mentioned something which is accurate, we are very far from reaching kind of the maturity of the market. We still grow at an average pace of now it's about 8 or 9 operators every day. So it's a huge kind of growth, and we still have operators. Some of them we reach out to actively if we're new in the market, but a lot of them already reach out to us because they know us. Usually, when we are active in a certain market, they can either reach out through the website and just the support would connect them with the supply teams, the business development teams, or they would kind of hear from us from the market, and one operator would recommend us to the other operator, and that's how we really expand.
And then let's talk about the consumer side as well, because I'm sure obviously people will be checking out the website to learn more about like becoming a partner or like how best to integrate into, but from a consumer side, because all of a sudden now they have the opportunity. And this is what always excites me is like once it's available to be booked. I mean, just look at Uber is probably the most relevant example today of creating a market that didn't exist before. Obviously everyone knows the Airbnb story, but like even the Uber, like to take something that you could now all of a sudden package and sell and monetize and continue to adapt and scale. So like from a consumer point of view, all of a sudden they're going to have access to ferries or bus schedules that they wouldn't otherwise. So for me as a traveler, that excites me a great deal, especially when I was a backpacker. But even if I'm traveling with my family or like, people looking for lower cost transport as well, like looking for alternatives to flights where it might be less expensive to travel by ground transport. So tell us a little bit about the consumer side. How are consumers working with, like, are they booking direct? Are they booking direct through your platforms? Are they booking through partners? How does the consumer side work?
First of all, it's important to mention that it maybe a lot of people think about this as a kind of backpacker product, and it really isn't, because if you look at the numbers in terms of distribution of tourists, we don't have we have the age distribution quite equal we've no tendency towards younger travelers or backpackers or solo travelers actually, or even more. We have a lot of families traveling in using our services. And the point is that if you want to get around, if you want to get away from the main hubs, if you are visiting a country and you want to visit more than the main city, you have to get ground transportation. Like in most cases, you won't have a flight that would get to that destination. And it turns out that people in a lot of these countries take 4 to 5 different journeys along their vacation or visit. And so it doesn't matter if you're a family with kids or you're a backpacker, you actually need to get that ferry if you want to get to the island, otherwise you're not going to get there. And actually, if you think about it, when you have kids, now instead of twins, I'm sure that the last thing that you want to do is stand at a pier and wonder when the ferry is coming. With the twins, you want to book it in advance and make sure that you have the place on the ferry when it arrives. So that's like everybody needs ground to sea transportation. That's the first thing, and they find us today mostly through online channels, Google, to kind of be specific, I guess. And people search usually, and how do I get from this place to this place, and they find us online. If they look for us in social media, they would Twitter, Instagram. A lot of people actually post on my journey from Bangkok to Chiang Mai and how the train looks and so on. And a lot of times they would mention that they booked that on Want to Go or Bookaway or something like that. So people find us like this. We also have a distribution channel, which is a B2B distribution channel. So we have an API that other travel brands can connect to and then sell it as an ancillary, as an upsell to the services that are already selling. So people find us on various distinct places.
And no, the one thing that when you said that, I've been in that exact situation in Greece with my wife and the 2 kids, having spent like the day in Santorini and waiting to go back to the island we were staying on, and the ferry, we were in the wrong line. And we didn't realize it because the technology wasn't there. And this is still in recent times. This is only a few years ago. And the ferry left, and then we were told that was our ferry. And then we ended up having to take another ferry that stopped at multiple islands. It took us like 6 hours to get back. Everyone was miserable. And it was one of those days where I'm just like,
yeah, the kids are crying and
exactly.
Yeah, right.
So
and you just
I have been there. Like that's why I like this in many ways. Like this is like there has to be a technology to solve for this. How can I order an Uber but I can't decide of 3 ferries which is the one to get on? Like it seems so antiquated.
Yeah. And getting back to your point about Uber, the point is, and this is something we firmly believe, is that when you enable easy access and easy and seamless kind of journey to different places, you actually open up the market and you enable people to visit new exciting destinations. Because one of the reasons that you would go to, let's say, so you mentioned Santorini, we're from like there's like several, I don't know, hundreds of islands in Greece. There's Naxos and Zakynthos and all that, and you don't go to these islands because they don't have an airport. And you could go there if it was easy to get there. And these are amazing islands. They're called second tier destinations, not because they're second, but just because they're not like the main place that people get to. But a lot of times they happen to have a much nicer experience, less dense. We have a few examples that I can mention of places that have grown in the last couple of years, and I think that it is enabled by better transportation, and that's part of the thing that we're really proud of and really focusing to do in Traveleo, which is enabling kind of access to great, amazing places in the world that otherwise would be hard to reach.
So this, to me, is probably the most exciting aspect of what you guys offer and where the market is headed, because we genuinely have an issue of over tourism in certain key cities, and people are starting to distribute the time of the year they're traveling places. That's one option, that people are traveling more in the shoulder seasons. But overwhelmingly, we're seeing travelers decide on alternate destinations. So there's all these kind of like lookalike destinations, or and that's also taking off now. It's like so it starts with countries where all of a sudden people they were going to Croatia and now they're going to Albania, but they're going from they still want to see Paris, but they actually are making alternative itineraries to take them to what people would describe as hidden gems, but even they become kind of well-worn path after a while. And I always think back to the Lonely Planet, off the beaten path. But the reality is most of those destinations, as soon as they're in a Lonely Planet guide, they become the beaten path. That's the reality. It's like everyone finds out about them, and next thing you know, they're flooded and they're overwhelmed. And it's one of the things that excites me a great deal after having been at the ATTA conference in Chile last year. It took 4 flights and 2 buses to get there. And it took, a little more than 2 days to get to this remote region of Patagonia that we were traveling to. And it was absolutely worth it. Like it was, and once we got there.
Where was it?
So the conference was in Puerto Natales, but we were actually in the Isen region beforehand doing a cycling trip. And so, I flew from Toronto to Bogota to Santiago, and then there's 2 flights to get actually down to Porto Arenas, and then we had to take a bus but once we got there, there's nobody around. It's stunning, pristine beauty, and it's like, and people are saying we want to keep it this way. We want to make it more challenging to get to because this is not. And so for me, being able to unlock those like secondary destinations is the most exciting opportunity in travel today. So tell us a little bit more about those emerging destinations and how you guys are being able to create that connectivity.
Yeah, so interesting anecdote. I actually spent 5 days in Porto Natales, but I actually never left my room. I had 40 degrees fever the whole time.
Oh no!
And all my
okay.
friends had a great time, and they did. I think they did the trek there. There's a famous walking track there, like a hiking trail there. Really famous. Can't remember the name. And
it's in Puerto Natales is Torres del Paine, which is one of the
Torres del
beautiful.
Paine.
Yeah, that's like extraordinary. We spent an evening there, and a lot of people after the conference went back and spent a couple of days hiking there. And you can do horseback riding. It's extraordinarily beautiful. But tell us how you are unlocking those second tier destinations with your technology and some examples.
Yeah. So first of all, it's just enabling to actually book these services, the service to these destinations easily online, unlocks that destination, and allows people to actually get there easily. Now, once you start to actually have tourists in a certain region and the infrastructure starts to improve, we actually see that the number of operators that actually are working in that region actually usually grows. And we start to get even better services, nicer buses, and more companies doing that route. A lot of times we do that actively because we go to the operators and we tell them, look, we think there's demand for that region. Let's kind of open a route there, and we're willing to kind of pre-buy some inventory to make sure that it's worth it for you guys to open it up. I think that there's a few interesting destinations. If you think about it, I think Ninh Binh in Vietnam is like becoming super popular. I don't think anybody heard about it 5-10 years ago, maybe. Amazing place. If you think about Thailand, I don't think that one is not related to us at all, but Koh Tao is one of the most popular, I think, growing destinations that we have. When you think about it, Koh Samui is actually the highlighted kind of destination with the White Lotus and everything being filmed there and that. But Koh Tao is basically the same, right? But just a little bit further away and less crowded. And that's a really, really nice growing destination. We basically, once our perception is, once you allow the easy booking experience, the seamless experience to actually get there, and really traveling around the country is a huge pain. And once you make it a fun and easy experience, you unlock a lot of new destinations, and you distribute tourism in a healthier way across regions.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect example, because when we first were backpacking, traveling around Southeast Asia, and we went to Koh Samui, Koh Phangan, and Koh Tao, and obviously the taking a ferry between those islands. Then at the time, this is our first trip there was 20 years ago, and Koh Tao was incredibly remote, and it was known for diving. And the remoteness was its appeal. And, today, obviously, Thailand has become such an international tourist destination for so many people around the world that it's really developed. Obviously, Koh Samui is like fully developed, almost like Hawaii in many ways. And there's people that love those kind of resorts, and that's why they'll still continue to go to a place like Koh Samui. And it is a beautiful island. But for those travelers that want something more remote, finding these ways to get there, and this was the part for me that, like, there was a charm and appeal to the unpredictability of trying to find your way around. But that's only in the case if you have, you're taking 3 months or 6 months, you're on a gap year trip. And so what I like about the utilization of technology is that someone who only has a week or 10 days can still be able to figure out how to get to Koh Tao and be able to make their bookings, as opposed to, having a situation where they might miss a day and they don't have that day to spare.
And one of the ways, by the way, that we find that actually increases demand for certain destinations is that the connected trips. So we stitch, one of the things that we're able to do, because we serve multimodal, like a lot of forms of transportation, we're able to stitch together different types of transportation. So while we're ground, like we call ourselves a non-air travel company, we do have flights on the platform because we're connected to different flights, and we're able to actually sell to you a bundle of a flight and a ferry. So if you want to get to Koh Tao, you can book like Bangkok directly to Koh Tao with us, and you get the flight and you get the ferry, and you get a connection in one ticket. And that's something that really kind of solves us through a lot of problems. And so we're able to connect flights with different modes of transportation. We're able to connect different modes of transportation, like buses and a ferry. And we're able to connect just the different buses to that A to B and B to C, just stitching together A to C. And that solves for a lot of kind of figuring out and unknowns and what's going to happen if I get there and there's no bus.
Exactly, yeah. So tell us, I'd love to hear a few more examples of this, because many travel advisors listen to our podcast as well. They're trying to make recommendations for their clients as to places they can go, but they want to rely on the fact that they're going to have a great experience. They're not going to have issues getting there. So they need to have a trusted supplier they can work with. So tell us, what are some other standards? We've talked about Chile. We've talked a little bit about Greece. We've just talked about Thailand. What are some of the other global destinations that you're seeing connectivity open up new travel opportunities?
So I think Indonesia, we see a lot of growth. We see there's a lot of different islands, different opportunities in there. I think Morocco, surprisingly, is an interesting market that's is growing and getting a lot of kind of popularity. Costa Rica, as an example, really becoming very popular with U.S. tourists. Japan is growing enormously, but that's not a new kind of, that's not a new story. But the amount of Western tourists that are getting to Japan and finding it easier to kind of explore the different destinations within Japan is growing.
Well, it's interesting when you mention Japan, because one of the things that is often highlighted, and Shannon Stoll does a great job of this when he's talking about how travelers, 90% of travelers will only travel within 100 miles of the destination they're arriving in. And this is one of the challenges with modern day tourism, and especially with a country like Japan, is actually opening up access to more remote areas of the country that are beautiful, but part of the reason they're inaccessible, or you can't get there in a timely manner, despite the fact there are bullet trains across the country. But there are places that are just not as accessible. And so for me, this opportunity really excites me as far as new and emerging destinations. But the other thing I want to talk about is what is, you mentioned about competitors, and acknowledging obviously you do have competitors today. You also mentioned something that really stood out to me, which is about the speed of execution. And so when I have conversations with successful startup entrepreneurs like yourself, and I think back to the conversation I had with Jake Peters, who's the co-founder of Fora. And one of the things that he was very confident, and many of our listeners heard this in our Spotlight episode, is like he was very keen to be able to share the roadmap, what they're working on. He was not concerned about competition in the same way because he knows this team is going to be focusing on delivering. It's not about trying to conceal what some of their plans are. It's like, this is the direction we're headed. Here's the product we're going to incorporate. Here's the markets we're going into. And it's just like, and I feel like there's a lot of similarities between their success trajectory and yours. And also just given like the wisdom and experience that you have from previous and then now running this company for 10 years. And so one of the things I'm always keen to understand about company success stories, let alone startup success stories, is what differentiates them, what makes them truly unique. So one of the questions I was very keen to ask you from a technology point of view with partners, why would they choose to work with you versus building it themselves? I know part of the answer to that myself, having been on the other side of the table, which is often, technology is not the expertise of travel companies. They struggle to build platforms and technology. But what would be, from a partner point of view, the competitive advantages for Travelier and the brands? Like, what are some of the compelling reasons that clearly you guys are continuing to see the growth you are?
So first of all, I think that it's not as easy as it sounds building it yourself, because the basic building blocks are not there for ground and sea transportation. Because what we ended up building and are still continuing to work through is the entire infrastructure. So a lot of times we go to the market and an operator wouldn't have a booking system, right? So we actually are a SaaS booking system that we provide them, and we become their entire system of record for online and offline bookings. So we've done that. So operators use us a lot of times. We have a point of sale. Also, like if you go to the offline, sometimes you're using our systems. So we've done that. Now, then there is the aggregation block. Now, serving millions of requests of different travel providers and websites and so on is a system that needs to be scalable and needs to return answers in a fast pace, and needs to return accurate answers, right? So you actually want to know that the bus actually is first of all available, that the price is correct, and so on. And that infrastructure has been built through dozens of years with companies like Amadeus and Sabre and so on. And that's not an easy infrastructure to build. And we're building that for transportation today. And the experience, and still in flights, by the way, I'm sure that sometimes you would look at a kayak or something, you click on the flight, and then you go to the checkout and it tells you, sorry, we actually don't have that flight, right? That still happens in flights. In transportation, the problem is much bigger because the infrastructure is not there. Now, the infrastructure itself is very different, because if you think about flights, if you go from New York to London, you're flying from JFK and landing in Heathrow. It doesn't matter if it's Delta or United. They're going from A to B. That's it. If you are in buses, then the bus could leave from multiple locations within the city. It could leave from Union Station, from Chinatown, from just a random place in the city, and it can land in various places, and it actually stops in the middle. So you have multiple legs in the middle that people go on and off, and it changes the availability and the and sometimes the pricing as well. So that's a whole infrastructure that is a lot of heavy lifting to build, and the big players could probably build it, but it'll be simpler for them to buy one of us or a competitor if they want to go into the market. And that's why we're not really worried about that. Like we know that today we are the infrastructure layer for a lot of the ground and sea transportation markets in the world.
Really fascinating. And I guess that's, from then a consumer point of view, what would be, because thinking purely as a consumer myself and an avid traveler, one thing is, if you offer something I can't get elsewhere, obviously that's a reason to travel with you, full stop. So, that example you shared about Thailand is a perfect example. I didn't even know that existed. And so knowing that it does on a future trip, I would have, because we took our kids back and we took them to Koh Samui, and we actually left after a week. We planned to spend 2 weeks. We left after a week just because it was not what we remembered. It was very crowded, and we were just like, this is not, we should have made alternate plans, and we did. And we ended up going to Sri Lanka for a week. And instead on our trip, we literally reworked our trip and went to Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka was incredible. And I was like, and I'm so glad that we went and experienced Sri Lanka, because it offered all the things that we remembered from Thailand, 15 years before. So from a consumer point of view, how important are the brand proposition that you have? Like how relevant is it for consumers to know your brands? Is it mainly kind of the B2B angle, or which of your brands, especially traveling.com, are the ones that consumers should know about, and what is the specific advantage of using them versus what your competitors might be offering?
So first of all, our brands have different go-to-market strategies, right? So one brand, Want to Go, is a very tourist-facing brand. It serves mostly Western tourists in Southeast Asian markets. So a lot of Europeans, North America tourists that get to Asia really hear about Want to Go in a lot of blogs, a lot of social media posts, and so on. Um, and then we have different brands that are domestic facing brands. By the way, the market is made of domestic customers, which are domestic tourists and international tourists. And domestic customers are not people that are commuting. They are people that are going on vacation or in their own country, or actually visiting their family or something like that. They go long distance, right? So, for example, the carnival in Brazil that's happening next week is an example of domestic, a huge domestic tourism event. So we have brands that are focused on the domestic customers. We have brands for Latin American domestic customers. We have a specific brand for Brazilian domestic customers, and that these brands have kind of evolved to have a certain brand recognition in their respective geographies.
That's really so. For let's just run through them really quickly, because I actually want to make sure all our global listeners know what the consumer brands are and what markets they operate in. So just give us a quick overview of that.
Yeah, so Want to Go is mostly operating in Asia with international tourists. We have Bookaway.com that is mostly for international tourists in Latin America. Also operates in other regions though. Traveling.com is mostly European focused, Mediterranean, I guess, Europe. Then Plataforma 10, Plataforma DS is a Latin American brand, Argentina, Paraguay, Colombia, Peru, etc. And then the Omnibus is a Brazilian brand. And I think the conversation about multi-brand is a wider conversation of what it brings versus the execution hurdles that it has. And we kind of currently we're choosing the path of having different brands in different regions, because it allows us to uh, to have a different kind of product market fit in every region.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think, what the global growth opportunity for you and the team is incredibly compelling. I'm sure obviously your investors are bullish as well, because there are so many untapped opportunities globally to connect that supply with an increasingly growing demand that is expected to, double over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. If there's 400 million travelers now, there's going to be 800 million by 2050. And so it's going to be that much more important to make sure that people are distributed properly. All the factors at play, which is why investors are so bullish on travel, with the aging baby boomer population, the generational wealth transfer, younger generation, much more focused on traveling than, saving for retirement or buying a home. All the factors are in play for travel to continue, despite the setbacks, which you've been in the travel industry long enough to know that there are short-term setbacks by virtue of global events or geopolitical events, but travel is resilient. It always comes back. It comes back different. So having a business that is global and that has that diversity is incredibly important. So I want to talk about where you guys are headed. Having said all of that, and all of our listeners getting a better understanding of the background on your story and where you guys have gotten to, but let's talk about 2026 and beyond. Tell us a little bit about where you guys are headed, whether it be new markets, new brands, expanding to more partnerships. What's on your roadmap for 2026, and what ultimately I want to know what your success looks like in 2030. But let's talk about 2026 first. So what is on your roadmap for this year?
Yeah, first of all, we're going into several new geographies. We're localizing our systems in certain geographies to new audiences. So for example, in Asia, one of the audiences that we're not serving too very well is the domestic audience. So we also have a lot of opportunities there, because people like in Thailand, in Vietnam, and so on are traveling domestically, and that's a huge part of the market which we are kind of want to focus on a little bit more. We have a B2B new business unit, which is rather new, and it took us a while to really technically merge all of the different APIs and the operators that we connected to, and now we are able to offer one kind of single source that you can get all of ground sea transportation and add it to your platform. So that's one growth lever that we firmly believe in the next couple of years. And in general, we just feel that we have so much to do, even in the basic stuff. And a lot of times I think that still, even though we've taken huge leaps in how the industry has evolved and how easy it is to book transportation today versus 10 years ago, still the experience in ground sea transportation is not amazing, right, in a lot of places. And the distance between how easy and seamless it is to book a hotel in Booking today and how easy and seamless it is to book a ferry or a bus is where we need to go to, is the distance that we need to walk. And we're getting there. And 2030, I'm sure that booking a bus or a ferry anywhere in the world and getting to any destination is going to be a non-issue, to the point that you wouldn't even consider, is it worth it or not? If you want to get to some point, you're just going to book it and know that you'll be able to get there easily and enjoy the experience while doing that.
Yeah, well, and let's talk about that. Like 2030 is not that far away. I mean, it is only 4 years away, so it's not even a 5-year plan anymore. But 2030 is a milestone that many companies are looking at for their sustainability efforts or their growth targets, and it's kind of the next big milestone as we move into the next decade. Where do you want this business to be, or where do you think you guys will be entering 2030 in terms of I know obviously you rebranded successfully to Travelier, and I mean that's just part of the journey you've been on, and you've acquired competitors. You continue to build new brands within the business. When you talk to the team and your investors, what are sort of the long-term plans of how you see Travelier in 2030?
So in the end, I think that ground sea transportation is one of the several verticals that you have in traveling. In every vertical, you see clear, I guess, winners or kind of companies that took most of the market, whether it's Booking and Expedia in hotels or Get Your Guide, Viator in experiences. And we want to be the company that really takes ground sea transportation and lead that vertical, and we are on the way to get there. And we understand that as the industry matures, and the industry went through a process, started with flights and then hotels went online, and experiences and tourism experiences is kind of the recent decade online advance. Ground and sea transportation is really literally the last undigitized segment. And if everybody is thinking about the connected trip and want to get there, the glue to the connected trip is transportation. So you can't really connect the trip without getting from place to place. And so we know the industry is going together. We know that the customers are there already. We know that whatever inventory that we put online, that we put on the shelf, there's demand for it, and people are looking to buy online. In some markets, we're as low as, like, the online penetration is as low as 5%. In other markets, it's higher. But still, there's huge blue oceans in various regions of the world that we want to get into.
For sure. No, it's a very exciting and bright future, and I'm incredibly encouraged from getting to know you and seeing the trajectory of the business and getting to know a bit more about the team. And obviously, our conversation today has only further validated that. And I guess that's where when people are listening to this, I'm sure there's many different angles that people can plan to connect with you or reach out to you. What would sort of be, from your vantage point, the primary ways to connect and collaborate with you guys for, whether it be, clearly there might be some investors that are interested in the next stage of your journey, but I'm actually thinking more about, partners and suppliers. I'm thinking about distribution platforms.
So we're pretty easily kind of accessible. You can email me directly, noam@travelier.com. It's simple. You can shoot me a message on LinkedIn. Just make sure you explain the context. I get a lot of messages that are mostly sales, right? But we're happy to talk to anyone that has like a relevant context.
Yeah. And then you mentioned about getting older and having kids. Tell us where you're headed this year for your travels. What's on the horizon for you? And when you're out there, are you testing some of this technology and also exploring some of these new destinations?
I do. Yeah. We like to eat our own dog food, I guess. So I make sure to try different services when I'm my last trip was Thailand. Actually, I don't know where is my next vacation. Um, so my next flight is ITB, right? But we're probably going to somewhere in Europe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think the reality for most of us now is that we're trying to find a way to combine business and leisure travel, right? That's like, I'm sure you're doing the exact same thing where you're trying to figure out, wait, I'm going here, and like, can my wife come or can the kids? And it's like,
Look, I'm pretty well positioned, right? So we have offices in great destinations, right? So if you're getting to the Brazil office, Sao Paulo, I mean, the big temptation to stay around and go to one of the beaches, right? Thailand definitely. Um, most of the time I need to kind of hold back on the temptation to actually stay in the remote office.
for sure. Now, let's leave everyone with one last takeaway from you, Noam Given. Like, we've covered so much, but like, if there was one big misconception about Grand and Sea travel that you continually hear for people that are trying to understand who you are and what you guys do, what's one thing that if you could change, what would that be? And we'll leave that as a takeaway for all of our listeners.
I think the one thing that I would like to kind of leave you with is that ground sea transportation is a huge and super important part of the travel industry, and it's currently being overlooked. And it's something that everybody needs. Everybody's going to use it at some point of their travels, and everybody's going to have a hard time booking it unless the industry goes online. So it's a huge opportunity, and it's really kind of the last opportunity to digitize the industry in travel today.
Yeah. Well, and I find that incredibly exciting, and I'm keen to know when you guys are doing your next round. But you and I will see each other many times throughout the year, and I look forward to having you back on Travel Trends to do another spotlight in the future to follow your success and growth trajectory, whether it's this year or sometime next year. But I've really enjoyed this spotlight episode. Obviously, it's great getting to know you, but also fantastic to hear your story. So all the best to you and the team for a terrific 2026. And I look forward to seeing you soon and keeping in touch. Thank you again.
Thanks. Great to be here, and thanks for the interview.
Thanks so much for joining us on this special spotlight episode of Travel Trends. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Noam Toyster, the CEO and co-founder of Travelier, a really fascinating company that's continuing to grow significantly. And you can hear why as we had this conversation on all the brands that they have under their umbrella, both the companies they acquired during the pandemic and how they're expanding across the globe with entering new markets with both marketplace platforms and solutions for suppliers. So definitely check out Travelier.com if you want to find ways to partner with Noam and the team. And don't forget that we do post clips and highlights from these conversations on all our social channels, which you can find on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And if you enjoyed this spotlight episode, definitely make sure you're subscribed on the streaming platform of your choice, Apple, Spotify, and of course, YouTube. And then we post all the spotlights on our website at traveltrendspodcast.com/spotlights. Thanks again for joining us and being part of this global community. We really appreciate it. Until next time, safe travels.